Malcontent News is a team of journalists, activists, and researchers with three key missions. A commitment to show an unfiltered view of the before, during, and after of key events, live, as it happens. To defend the First Amendment using our rights of a free press. And to amplify the voices of underrepresented individuals including Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Our team is committed to seeking equality for all and holding those in power accountable. The easiest way to support Malcontent News is to bookmark our website at malcontentnews.com, like and follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter, TikTok, Twitch, Instagram, and in the Google News app. To provide financial support, you can become a patron, make a one-time donation through Venmo, or link your Twitch account to your Amazon Prime account and use your free subscription to subscribe to Malcontent News. Thank you for supporting independent journalism and for being a malcontent. Good evening, Malcontents. I am David. I am the Malcontent. Today is Monday, April 19th, 2021. I hope you're doing well as we start yet another week. Jennifer, how are you doing this evening?
Aside from the trees hating me and like injecting pollen into my eyes and nose and face, I'm doing okay. How are you?
I'm doing well. I cannot complain tonight. Jennifer, I guess, we always start with a little chit chat at the beginning of things. You've got a story about a Seattle police lieutenant who has quit.
Yeah, Lieutenant Sina Ebinger of the Seattle Police Department chose to quit versus being fired after it was discovered through an OPA investigation or being investigated by the OPA she is currently. That was very Yoda-esque. I'm sorry. Directed city contractors to remove trash from her personal property. So essentially, she used city resources for personal gain and then lied about it. As a former officer, Ebinger has no comment. But because she quit, she could actually be a police officer again.
Yeah, because she didn't get that fired on her record, so she could potentially just go somewhere else and make that city remove her trash at taxpayers' expense. So apparently something that we've learned today is how to get fired by the Seattle Police Department, which is to use city resources to remove garbage from your personal property. You know, Jennifer, back in February when we had the snowstorm, we had reported that King County Health told the local communities, hey, we got it covered, and we had talked with the city of Kirkland. A couple of updates there. King County Public Health actually reached out to us. We reached out back to them, and I've been sitting for a couple of weeks on this, and we haven't heard anything back after they reached out to us. We reached out to them. Now they've gone dark. They had something to say about it. I don't know what they had to say about it, though. Kelly Curtis, who is on the city council for Kirkland, approached me over the weekend and told me what Kirkland ended up doing was providing hotel vouchers. They actually provided hotel vouchers to 50 families or individuals during that snow event to get them out of the cold. And I was told by the city of Kirkland that for major significant weather events that'll be the protocol they're going to follow going forward.
Okay, I mean, not to knock that, because I think that's a good thing, but like how many families are unhomed in that area that are not getting these vouchers?
And to be candid, Jennifer, I don't know the number of people who are completely unsheltered in Kirkland. I know the number is at least in the low hundreds, but I do not know the exact number.
Okay, well, maybe we'll have to keep an eye on that.
We will keep an eye on that. We also reached out to OPA to get an update on a couple of stories. The first one was on Eric Whitehead. If you remember,
Yes.
or if your audience doesn't remember Eric Whitehead, he's the one on January 15th at a hospital refused to wear a mask. They had to bring in like the head nurse and then the nursing supervisor. There were other police officers there. Nobody would help. Safe Seattle called the nurse that complained to snitch. Then the video came out. OPA said the video was even worse than what the nurse had to say. Safe Seattle got quiet. Anyway, that's the nugget on that. OPA said the investigation would go fast, and of course, we're approaching May. So we reached out to them. OPA did respond to us, and they said we will be hearing in about 2 weeks on the decision on that case, Jennifer. We also reached out asking about East Precinct and who made the decision to evacuate the East Precinct back on June 8th. Director Meyerberg was on Converge back in February, I want to say. And he said that that was a couple of months away. And so a couple of months have gone by. And we were told by OPA 2 more months to go on that one.
Yeah, really moving them investigations right along, huh?
I would imagine that I'm not defending OPA. I would imagine that there was a lot of thin blue line and a lot of brick wall going on who gave the order to evacuate the East Precinct. I have a feeling that that is a nasty rat's nest to untangle. Strictly my theory.
So we do also have a brief update on the Adam Toledo case. Chicago prosecutor James Murphy has been placed on leave for the comments he made prior to the video being released, where Murphy stated, quote, "Toledo has a gun in his right hand as Toledo turns towards the officer," end quote. So he is now, I'm sure, on paid administrative leave and still collecting a paycheck, but he has had some kind of reprimand for making those comments.
Yeah, the argument that people are making is, did he mean had versus has? Did he misspeak or not? His words were crystal clear to me when we ran the story on Adam Toledo, when the video came out and we unpacked that last week, that just horrible story. It isn't just like that sentence, right? It was this whole trial by public opinion, and I don't want to beat that dead horse into the ground, but thank you for that, Jennifer. We had a story last week about there was fire weather alert out for central, southwest, and southern Washington, and we've already had 2 wildfires in the Puget Sound lowlands in our backyard. Eatonville had one on Friday, and then in Auburn, there was a 50-acre brush fire that actually threatened some buildings. We had a record high of 80 degrees on Saturday. It's also one of the earliest years that we've gotten to 80 degrees. I believe it's 5th place. And we have had more perfectly clear skies so far in 2021 than in all of 2020. And it's not just our area that has bad fire data. It's all the way out to Minnesota, all the way down to Oklahoma, and then all the way back over to California. Almost everything west of the Mississippi River looks like it's going to be a shit show this year.
Yeah, so we're also tied for the longest streak of 70-plus degree days in April, and there's likely going to be a new record after tomorrow.
Yep, which I'm not complaining.
No, I'm not either. I'm starting to get a tan, and I'm like, this is all right.
I definitely don't feel like pasty white Jew anymore on today's show. I definitely picked up a lot of color being out this weekend. Jennifer, see it on TikTok, and then we're going to get to our land acknowledgement. Did you get a chance to see this video before I sent it over?
No, I did not, actually.
Well, this video has been reported by a number of news agencies. It's gone totally viral. I want to tell everybody right now, have a tissue, because this is magnificent.
Okay.
It is a privilege to render you your first salute. But it is a greater honor to say Congratulations, sir, on your commissioning.
I'm so glad they hug it out at the end. The first time I saw that, I was like, you cannot hug this out. This is your son. I get protocol, but your son is becoming an officer, and you could just hear his voice is shaking with pride, and his son, every fiber of his being not to cry, just beaming brightly, a strong black leader, being commissioned by his father, who is an E8. That's no small achievement in the Marine Corps. Also a strong black leader. Just an amazing video to share.
Yeah, absolutely. Really kind of get you like, my heart wasn't so blackened, be all warm and fuzzy.
Are you ready for the land acknowledgement?
I am.
There we go.
Malcontent News comes to you from Seattle, Washington, part of the occupied homelands of Coast Salish peoples. We're grateful to live and work as guests on these lands, the land which touches the shared waters of all tribes and bands within the Duwamish, Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. This land acknowledgement is but one small gesture in the ongoing process of working toward repairing and sustaining relations with Coast Salish lands, waters, peoples, and their other than human kin.
Jennifer, thank you so much for that. I love that we've added that to the show. This is the time of the show where we remind everybody, please spam those hearts. Spam those hearts, mess with the Facebook and Twitter algorithms. If you're watching us on YouTube or Twitch, you go, I can't spam hearts. You can do a big long line of hearts. If you're a subscriber on Twitch, you can get to use some of our emotes that we have over there too. You can say, love you mods, love you admins, love you Rashi or editor, love you researchers, love social media director, love you, David, Jennifer, just not in a weird, creepy way, please. And with that said, this is the time also. Share, like, follow, subscribe. We can't grow if you don't share, like, follow, subscribe, and amplify our voices, which amplify Black, Indigenous, person of color, LGBTQIA+. We are part of the Alphabet Mafia. And with that, we're going to go into our first story.
So today we heard, or actually the jury heard, closing arguments in the trial of Derek Chauvin, who is, of course, on trial for the murder of George Floyd in Minnesota. And as expected, you know, both the prosecution and the defense made their final plea to the jury and sought to defend their experts and their, you know, overall arguments, as they should. The defense spent a great amount of time, Eric Nelson spent a great amount of time trying to explain the jurors the burden of proof that the prosecution did not meet, and then really told them to read the directions carefully, the criteria and the parameters for finding someone guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And he listed all of the ways in which the prosecution did not accomplish this. But where it got really interesting is when there was reference to Rep. Maxine Waters' comments about what should happen after the verdict should Derek Chauvin not be convicted of the murder of George Floyd. And she said something to the effect of, people need to get more confrontational, get out into the streets, and really just let people know this is not going to just die down and go away. Well, the judge basically said she's because Eric Nelson tried to have a mistrial declared because of these remarks. But basically the judge said, yeah, her remarks were reprehensible, which I'm not even going to get into the whole false equivalency with Trump and the stolen election and the insurrection. And these are two different things. And I see a lot of false equivalency about this, but I'm just not going to engage that right now. But what he did say is that Rep. Waters' remarks could actually result in an overturned trial if there were an appeal.
Well, I know that starting tomorrow morning, Jennifer, poll cam, all the safety equipment, batteries are just going to be in the chargers constantly at this point.
Yeah.
Everything's going to be sitting at the door. We will cover the verdict live when it comes down. And depending on what the verdict is, I may just look in the camera and say, well, that's it. Live stream's over. I'm heading to Seattle. Or, we may unpack. We'll just see where it's at.
Yeah, it's interesting that they're already starting to reinforce major cities in preparation for the verdict coming down. I know Minnesota has got quite a bit of National Guard and reinforcements there. NYPD made a statement today that they are also in preparation, in the midst of preparation for when the verdict comes down, because they expect protesting there as well. So they're already beginning to reinforce major cities. I've said all along, you've said all along, it only takes one juror, and the burden of reasonable doubt is quite extreme. And so it only takes one person who has this kind of implicit bias about what constitutes excessive force, and if George Floyd was at any point in the wrong, to make this a hung jury, and then he goes free.
Well, the word reasonable police officer was dropped about 100 times by the defense today in trying to frame Derek Chauvin and his actions as reasonable. I did some reading over the weekend, Jennifer, and a lot of experts are flat out puzzled on how weak the defense was, with speculation being that this was as good as it could get, that they were probably having a very hard time finding anybody willing to kind of defend the case.
Well, and then I was reading something last week, too, that was sent through our chat about the expert that had actually volunteered to help the defense and was making the claims about carbon monoxide playing a role in George Floyd's death. And he is actually part of a wrongful death lawsuit involving another Black man. And I want to say, somebody in the comments, please correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's in Maryland, Dr. Fowler.
You're correct.
So, that's the kind of witnesses the defense had. But again, we're talking about a group of people with different ideologies, different backgrounds, and, coming to a conclusion beyond a reasonable doubt that he is guilty of, what the prosecution has charged him with. And so that's a difficult feat, because you do have people that are sympathetic to the police. You are going to have people that are potentially sympathetic to the size differential, who have these ingrained stereotypes about Black people in their head that the defense repeatedly, brought up and tried to, deploy as much as possible to maybe invoke that. So you have a lot of things, and I am very tense about what is potentially going to happen, and I'm going to be checking my phone a lot in the coming days.
I think the other thing we need to acknowledge is that this trial has reopened wounds, particularly for the Black community, and the verdict, regardless of what they find, is going to further reopen those wounds within the Black community, and I think that needs to be acknowledged.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Jennifer, thank you for the update. We'll continue to monitor that. We're going to do a pause for the cause, and then we're going to go into our next segment. Hi, Malcontents. I'm David, the Malcontent, and I'd like to talk to you for a moment about supporting independent media. When you support us, you help us bring the before, during, and after. You help us defend the First Amendment. You help us amplify BIPOC and LGBTQIA voices, and you help us hold leaderships at a local, state, and federal level accountable. None of this would be possible without support by viewers just like you. When you become a patron for as little as $5 a month, you help buy technology, safety equipment, and help cover travel expenses so that we can continue to bring you news that you trust. If you can't become a patron, you can do a one-time donation on Venmo. and your dollars will go to the exact same causes. With your continued support, we can continue to amplify BIPOC and LGBTQIA voices while showing the truth on what is happening in the world around us. Once again, thank you. It's that time again. It's time for Malcontented Minutes. We didn't do Malcontented Minutes last week because we had a very busy news cycle. It's a little quieter today, so we're making up for lost time. We're doing Malcontented Minutes today. We may do it again on Thursday. If you're not familiar with Malcontented Minutes, it's real simple. Jennifer and I have 20 minutes. We have 10 stories. We have 1 minute to tell the story, 1 minute to unpack the story. We're not hard and fast on those rules, but Jennifer and I have gotten pretty good at kind of getting through this in 22 to 25 minutes. The other thing is there's a poll. Mods and admins, go ahead and drop that poll into the this way, not over there. There it is. Drop the poll over into the comment section over there. You get to control the news because you get to pick the story that Jennifer and I will talk about a little bit more at the end of the show tonight. Now, you can go to the poll now if you want to go see what the 10 stories are, but we always recommend don't vote until you've heard all the stories. The other thing I always like to say, if a story, and we have several video segments today, if a story is simply just a video segment, like of some cute animal or something, and that's what you can see, you can vote for the cute animal, and we'll play the cute animals again. And sometimes we'll get arbitrary on your asses, and we'll play them anyway. Jennifer, are you ready to get started?
I am.
All right, here we go. The clock is running for story number 1.
So President Biden took the National Archives and Records Administration in Seattle off the market today. It was one of those slated to be sold, and all of the records were going to be relocated to other archives, national archives across the United States. There was a lawsuit brought forth by 29 Native nations from across the Pacific Northwest and Alaska, because a lot of those records are things that they don't have access to, and there's a lot of BIA records in there. I've done extensive research there, I know. There's also really important things called like the Robbins Rolls, which actually kept track of enrollment in Native nations in the early 20th century. My advisor, Josh Reed, he's Snohomish, and he's worked extensively with the Makah Nation. He was one of the people that spoke out and wrote letters petitioning against the closure of NARA in Seattle. And so that is no longer going to be an issue. And I'm going to get to finish my dissertation and research in Seattle rather than the city.
Very cool. My view on this is that when the Trump administration went to close this was just meant as two of these to Washington State, and an attempt to pull jobs, money, resources, and also two middle fingers to historians, Native American history, indigenous history, and the attempt to just erase that from the administration. So I'm very happy to see that this has been reversed. It should have never happened in the first place. There's a number of things as the clock goes by that I am unhappy with on the Biden administration. Immigration, that's right, Trumpers. We're not mindless drones. We actually hold our leaders accountable. And with that said, I'll give the W here, but damn, they need to address crap on the border. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and I'll start with story number 2. Story number 2, Amazon to examine employees' review system for disparity and racial bias. We reported back in March that Amazon was being sued for racial bias in job reviews and for firing a former black employee. And others then came forward after this employee came forward. Last week, Amazon stated they would examine the process for performance reviews in 2021. In a memo sent to employees, also posted on the company's website, so you can go to Amazon.com and go look for it up on their PR side. Amazon's HR boss, Beth Galletti, said the company would look for any statistically significant demographic differences in performance ratings conducted in the first quarter of this year to identify any problems and take actions where necessary. Amazon will also perform a similar evaluation of its attrition rates and low performance actions to identify any potential gaps.
Do you know what I like hear in my head when you read that from Amazon? Blah, 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 blah.
I was going to say, are you hearing the Charlie Brown teacher?
What?
Wah,
Yeah.
wah, wah, wah,
Yeah.
wah.
I was like, that is the most performative canned response, bullshit response. Oh, we're going to examine, from the first quarter because, that's going to be indicative of all past racial biases in performance evaluations. Okay, whatever. We're just going to put this out so we feel a little better about ourselves, especially after that union bullshit. But okay.
Yeah, look over here. We're addressing racism. Forget the union thing. Over here, racism. Look over here, racism.
We're going to put some employees on Twitch in a video talking about how we're the least racist company ever and they love working for us. They're all going to be black.
Looking like they're at gunpoint. All right, yeah. Jennifer, story number 3.
So I have this theory about Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert that was like further reinforced over the weekend when somebody in our news chat posted something about this vote for something, and they were the only 2 that voted against it. So I have this theory that they share one brain. So I'm just going to go with that. If she can like put out this theory about Jewish space lasers, I can put out that they share a brain. But after Maxine Waters made the remarks about if the Chauvin verdict comes down in a way where he is not reprimanded for his actions, that people need to get confrontational and let people know this isn't just going to go away. She was going to draft something to have Maxine Waters removed because, false equivalency, blah, blah, blah. She's another person when she speaks, all I hear is the Charlie Brown teacher voice, but like not as smart. So that's what's kind of going on with her.
So Kevin McCarthy tonight is joining Marjorie Taylor Greene in looking to censure Maxine Waters for her comments there. Kevin McCarthy is, part of the Republican squad. Can we start calling them that? The Republic. I like that. That's like a little. I'm doing a lot of this tonight. The Republican squad.
Yes.
We're coining that right now. Somebody trademark that for us. He's part of the Republican squad that it just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If they were to discover the cure for cancer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Biden discovers the cure for cancer, he wants to give it everybody. McCarthy and Greene are like 2 people that would vote no.
Yeah. And Boebert, we can't because they share a brain, David. I'm pushing this. This is my conspiracy theory. They share one brain.
It very well may be. And they have to like exchange it one from the other. I like this theory. All right, story number 4. I'm going to roll this clip and then I'm going to really try to stick to my 60 seconds.
Investigators say Brandon Hull purchased 2 rifles he used in the FedEx rampage legally, even though police seized a shotgun from his home just a few months earlier after his mother reported her son might try to die by suicide by cop.
We were still working the scene.
The deputy chief of the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department says authorities had not deemed Hull subject to Indiana's red flag law.
He was involuntarily committed. They took the shotgun that he bought the day before he was involuntarily committed from him. They never gave it back. How in the hell was he able to legally buy 2 automatic rifles? This is insanity. Jennifer, rescue me from the rant.
This whole story is so bizarre. Not only do we have this issue where this clearly mentally ill person is given legal access to these firearms that he used to then commit murder, he has this weird thing where he's a brony, and that's a like extreme lover of My Little Ponies. And he had 2 Facebook pages, I guess, dedicated to them. This story is just so bizarre. And like one of them, he was like wanting to die so he could live with his favorite ponies. Like I love My Little Ponies too. There is one on the bookshelf behind me, but I have never like been so fanatic about it that I've wanted to kill people. Here we have again.
within
Huh?
the bro culture and
Yeah.
bronies, there is actually a lot of white nationalism and white
Yes.
supremacy.
Yeah, and it's so bizarre to me. And again, we go back to the problem with entitled white men. Like, it goes back to white men have this particular, white men, particular white men of a certain age, an ideological belief, have this sense of entitlement. And then when things don't go exactly the way as they want them to go, they react violently. So if you look at the majority statistically of violent crimes committed, it is by white fucking men. Excuse my language. White men.
What's the F-bomb?
White men.
This is written. This is written.
So if you want us to unpack that one, you can go ahead and vote on that story. Reminder, mods and admins, go ahead and drop that poll link one more time. We're halfway through. We're to the halfway point. But this is a point I want to tell you. Drop the link, because if you came in, you're like, what's going on? You're talking about these stories really fast. You get to choose the news. You get to pick the story. Jennifer and I will unpack more. If you want to unpack about brony culture and white nationalism, gross, we'll do it for you. Also, like to remind you, please spam those hearts. If you're not feeling very hard, you can say, I like it also. When you spam those hearts, you mess with the Facebook and Twitter algorithm. You help us grow. If you're watching on Twitch or YouTube, I can't spam hearts. You could just do like, I love you mods or something like that. And with that, we're going to go ahead and roll story number 6.
And a severed finger?
Literally been laughing all day because if I don't, I think I might cry.
The truck belongs to former volunteer firefighter and EMT Francesca Wickoff, so she has the stomach for this sort of thing from her previous work experience.
You would think if you're gonna go to the hospital, especially if you just sever your finger off, that you would take said finger with you.
Francesca believes the tire slasher cut her back tire, then cut his finger off on accident.
We assume it happened around 10:30 last night because we had our neighbor across the street that lives next door to him heard a yell and some crying around 10:30, and then he sped off shortly after.
Karma is just so fantastic. There's like, so part of what you did hear in the clip that's ended on the cutting room floor in the interest of brevity, there was actually a blood trail that goes from her house over to the neighbor's house. Police are investigating, but Jennifer, so far there has not been an arrest.
Just want to say real quick, we skipped number 5 about the croissant.
I realized that as I looked at show notes, and we will come back to story 5. You still get to talk about severed fingers and slashed tires.
I'm just curious how this happened. Like, I want the details of how this finger got severed off in the midst of tire slashing. Like, I want more context. And to have this, like, this woman is what? She's an EMT, right?
Yep.
Yeah, she's an EMT. So, like, what do you do? Slice your own finger off while you're slashing her tires, then maybe go knock on her door with your severed finger and be like, I'm sorry, I cut my finger off while I was slashing your tires. Do you think maybe you could help me?
It's one hell of a sharp something that was used.
Yeah.
Because I found unedited pictures. For obvious reasons, we're not going to show it unblurred. We get taken off the air on the social channels if we did. It's a super clean cut, Jennifer. And I'm still like, you didn't take the finger. And like, what are the police waiting for? If it was the neighbor, it should be like, show us your hands.
Yeah. Like that, you know.
Okay, can you explain this? Jennifer, you get story 5 and 7 back to back because I jumped the gun. So here you go, story 5.
A woman called for assistance in Poland the other day when she thought she saw a strange animal in a tree and was concerned. David, can you roll the clip, please?
Well, you may want to think twice before you call animal control.
A woman in Poland learned the hard way that you shouldn't do that. She called animal control for what she thought was an animal trapped in a tree.
But upon closer look, this creature, which I believe does look like a squirrel, actually.
See, I don't see it.
It's like a squirrel. I mean, you could kind of, almost like a sloth as well. A furry animal, something. Do you know what it actually was? It was a croissant.
Talk about a flake.
The end of that video was talk about a flake. What a pun. Like, she must have felt really good about herself after that. At any rate, this woman thought this was an iguana in a tree, and so she was really concerned, calls animal control. They come out, realize it's a croissant that somebody probably threw out to feed animals on the ground and got hung up in the tree. So was not a mystery animal. And at the time the story was written, animal control had no idea of this mystery animal's whereabouts, what happened to the croissant after it was, captured. So
I'm just so totally confused at how she could think it was an iguana of all things in Poland.
I know. It doesn't look like how. I just want to know, maybe, like, what was she on?
Because I know Florida had this major cold snap, and they had this huge problem there with iguanas. And when they had this big cold snap, the iguanas were just falling dead out of trees and roofs and everything because they can't deal with the cold. And I know Poland in the summer can get very hot, but it's it's a continental climate. It gets really cold there in the winter.
Yeah, no, the iguanas in Florida were funny too, because people thought they were dead and they weren't. And so when it warmed back up, they came back to life and scared the shit out of everybody. All
right, Jennifer, you get a twofer. You get story number 7 because I jumped the gun on 6.
Yeah, so this is not a funny or any entertaining story. The trans community in North Carolina wants justice. And David, can you go ahead and roll the clip?
2 murders are raising concern on the safety for transgender people in Charlotte. Charlotte Black Pride says deadly attacks on transgender women of color is nothing new.
Hopefully this is not Charlotte's new normal.
The first murder was on Easter Sunday. Jada Peterson was shot and killed outside this Quality Inn on Queen City Drive. Then this Thursday, Remy Fennell was murdered at the Sleep Inn in University City. Friday, Dontarius Long and Joel Brewer were arrested, accused of killing these 2 transgender women.
So yeah, the 2 people that are arrested were actually, one is a registered sex offender, I believe, and the other one has some kind of felony conviction. But the rate of crimes against trans women of color in the last year have really spiked. And this is really becoming a huge issue for the trans people of color community, for trans people of color more broadly, violence being perpetrated against them. And so, they're really concerned. Trans women of color in particular are really concerned in that particular area. And so this, is something that I hope they come to an expeditious results. And these people are charged accordingly for their crimes. And, something can be done to make life a little bit safer for trans women of color, trans people of color more broadly.
A black trans they has the lifespan in the United States of 37 years.
Yeah.
Which is shorter than somebody living on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. And they not only have to deal with racism because of the skin of the color of their skin, but they have to deal with the intolerance because of their identity from a sexuality standpoint, and that cuts across all races.
No, it's so like just astonishing to me how people are so concerned with what other people choose to do in their bedroom. Like, who really cares? How is it fundamentally impacting you what somebody else chooses to do and who they choose to do it with behind closed doors?
That's exactly my view, and I know we've talked about that many times. All right, I'm going to move to story number 8. It's also not a great story in the trans community. Arkansas was the first state in the country to pass a law banning transitional care for minors. The measure is going to block access to puberty blockers, hormone therapy, and gender-affirming surgeries. One thing ironic about that bill, gender-affirming surgeries wasn't legal in the state of Arkansas to begin with on anybody under 18 years old to begin with. Families there who have children that are currently under treatment, the treatment has to stop. So they will no longer be able to access physicians and care for their trans children. So families are getting ready to move. One family right now raising money to move to New Mexico. Families in Texas, ironically North Carolina, where anti-trans laws like this only reinforce hate because, hey, I can get away with it, are preparing to move out. Jennifer, 14 15 states in this country considering anti-trans measures for children who want, when I say children, people under 18 who want to identify with the gender that they feel that they are.
I just don't understand the rationale for this. I just don't like, why is it so offensive to somebody else, how somebody else chooses to identify and how they choose to live their life? Like, what is it doing to some of you people that somebody feels like they were born in the wrong body, in the wrong gender, or doesn't want to identify by a gender, or love somebody with the same gender as them? There's this meme that goes around all the time about gay marriage. And this is just how stupid it sounds when people say I'm against gay marriage. And the meme says, okay, you're against gay marriage, then just say no if a gay person proposes to you. It's that simple. I just don't get it.
Jennifer, look, flat out, I've been hit on, like really hit on by a couple of gay guys in my lifetime. And my response has been, look, I'm super flattered. Like, whoa, cool. Because gay guys know how to look good. But it's it's not my thing, okay? And, let's knuckle up. We're still buddies, but not my thing. And, just if you don't push, it's the same thing. If no is no, right? And that applies and all the way. And that's it. Why is it so hard? I mean,
I don't get it. I don't get it.
All right, Jennifer, lift us up with story number 9.
Oh, this is super cute. And the backstory is kind of icky because these pugs were actually rescued from China before they were going to go to slaughter, but now they're actually available for adoption by the Pacific Pug Rescue in Portland, Oregon. And we have a video of them enjoying their new life.
Pacific Pug Rescue, based out of Beaverton, says that a China-based animal group asked for their help to save the dogs. Today, 13 of the 50 are arriving in Portland in just about an hour. The rescue group spent about $24,000 to pay for the dogs' airfare, and they say that it's well worth the expense.
Every penny that comes in from donations goes to helping the pugs. And like I said, $24,000 is going to be a large chunk of change to get these kids adoptable, but this is just sort of what we do. This is what we do for the pugs.
All of the dogs will go to a veterinary hospital where they'll get all of their vaccinations, a microchip, dental work, and they'll either get spayed or neutered.
Oh, God.
They're cute. And Pacific Pug Rescue does actually adopt out of area. So if somebody in Seattle were interested in a pug that they have, you can drive down there, you can meet the pugs, do the adoption paperwork, and they have a bunch of pugs available. And these guys, I have actual videos of them playing, and they are adorable.
They are super cute. I've been owned by pugs for a long time in my life. They're amazing little critters.
Yes.
I can't imagine them being slaughtered. It's a cultural thing. I'm not going to judge the cultural thing, but and I know, Jennifer, in finding that clip, there's actually, it's not just this group of 50. There are other groups that went to New York City. There's other groups. There's actually a big number of pugs that are coming over from China that were destined for the slaughterhouse. It is it's a heartwarming story. And with that, we come to the top of the batting order, the bottom, story number 10. Story number 10, we're going to go back to the Oregon Zoo because they have amazing videos. So that's Filbert, the beaver, enjoying their 10th birthday. What I found very interesting is that Filbert definitely had a preference for carrots and apples over the strawberries. That was something I noticed when I watched that video. Jennifer, you get 60 seconds to unpack.
What do I could maybe hypothesize why he has the preference for carrots and apples. Maybe they have a similar consistency to wood. I don't know. All I can think about is making some stupid beaver wood joke or woodchuck joke. I don't really have anything to say about this. Filbert is adorable. Happy birthday, Filbert. I hope you had a wonderful day.
I love how it's like, I need to carry as much of this as I can and go eat this in private now, and you can keep the flippin' strawberries.
Mm-hmm.
All right, this is the part, Malcontents, where we tell you it's time to go ahead and vote in the poll. Mods and admins, go ahead and drop the poll over in the links in the comment section. This is where you get to vote. You get to choose the news, and we will unpack the story that you want us to talk more about. You want to see Filbert the Beaver again? Vote for that one, and we'll just play the video, and it's really that simple. We're going to do a little pause for the cause, and then we're going to go on to our next story. So go ahead and vote.
Black Coffee is a hub for communities and a hub for meeting people, making friends, and understanding.
What Black Coffee is to me is a place to actually call home, a place where Black youth will feel welcomed, where Black families will come and feel like they're at home.
What we're trying to build is more than just coffee. Community is something that we do naturally. We know who's in the community, we know what the deficits are, and we're trying to fix that. We want to bring people together.
My hope is that the phrase grounded in excellence shows up everywhere and that it becomes a movement.
I'm looking forward to hanging out at Black Coffee with my friends and feeling safe.
Black Coffee to me means opportunity for people like me and my other friends and family to come here and do homework safely and hang out and stuff like that.
That is happening. It is happening.
Black Coffee Northwest is located in Shoreline, Washington, really close to 170th. They're located on the west side of Highway 99. Always tell people, check on their website or their Facebook page to confirm their hours because they wiggle every now and then. They have amazing coffee from Ethiopia. They have amazing merch. And if you're new and you're reading the comments and you're like, what is with the potato scones? They have amazing potato scones. I'm always calling out the potato scones. It is like the most fluffiest, perfect little scone you ever had in your life. And a baked potato with cheese and onion got together and had an amazing baby, and it just melts in your mouth, and it is just fabulous. All right, Jennifer, are we ready for the next story?
Yes.
The term not your model minority has been used, or I should say the term model minority, not your model minority, but the term model minority has been used as a wedge to divide the races because people want the races divided. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer. And Jennifer, who has amazing dog in her arms right now, is going to talk a little bit more about the Not Your Model Minority event that happened on Saturday.
So yeah, the term model minority was actually coined in 1966. I'm going to hold up my show notes and the dog. Coined in 1966 by William Peterson in a New York Times article. It advocated hard work, passiveness, and willingness to assimilate into white society. And immigration and legal reasons for this. There was a 1965 Immigration Act that reversed decades of restricted immigration policies. But when you say Asian, you are actually labeling dozens of races and nationalities. Laotian, Hmong, Cambodian are poorer than white counterparts. So Asian mean household wealth is actually also only 57% of white households in the United States. And anti-Asian hate crimes increased 150% in 2020 per the Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism. I'm sorry, holding a dog and reading is hard. But yeah, the term model minority has been challenged for some time now in academia and unpacked across various academic disciplines as a way in which it was divisive. It made it very difficult for a lot of people who identified as Asian American, for whatever that meant to them, And there is also like a hierarchy applied to this model minority label among actually people who are considered Asian. You have, white people who consider certain kinds of Asians above others. So they're applying this very kind of like racialized great chain of being hierarchy to the model minority stereotype, which is, of course, increasingly problematic.
Yeah, we've got a little bit of video from the Not Your Model Minority rally and march that happened in Seattle on Saturday, where there were a number of really amazing speakers.
This means a lot to me to get the chance to talk to all of you and to have all of you here. In March of 2020, I got to experience COVID-related racial harassment firsthand. I decided to walk to work in the afternoon instead of driving to work. When I was about a block away from Harborview, a white man who was standing on the street corner within a few feet of me started saying racial epithets and blaming my ethnicity for the spread of COVID-19. Whenever I go outside alone nowadays, I wonder if I'm going to be targeted by some random stranger because of my race and my gender, two characteristics that I was born with, that I cannot change, and that I cannot hide.
Jessie is a byproduct of our school-to-prison pipeline, mental health, homelessness, and foster care system. Jessie was a funny and sweet young man who loved breakdancing, wrestling, and Naruto. Jessie was having a mental health crisis in Auburn, Washington. The police were called to de-escalate the situation. At no time was a mental health response team called to check in on Jessie. Within 30 seconds of contact, while Jessie was chewing on ice, ironically sitting next to an ice machine, my foster son was killed, yet another unarmed person of color.
On the night of New Year's Eve in 2009, Miles and two of his friends were shooting blanks from a historic rifle into the air to celebrate the new year in a non-threatening way. Neighbors complained about the noise and called the police. When Miles opened his door, he didn't know the police were there. Witnesses said officers shined their bright lights in Miles' face and started shooting immediately upon seeing him exiting his apartment building. They say the same phrases to help justify the killings. In my brother's case, one of the things they said was, he stepped forward. By controlling the narrative, they influence public opinion before investigations are conducted. But whatever they say the victim was supposedly doing, it does not give them the right to kill.
There are so many of us that have these horrific experiences where it could have been different if one person had just stood with us. It was right for that person to stand up and call out the racist remark.
It was a great event. It was hot. It was hot. It felt a lot hotter than 80 degrees there, but it was an absolutely wonderful event. There were more speakers. We wish we could show more. We're trying to keep the clips down under to 3 minutes, and those were just some highlights of what was there that day. There was a march. One of the things also, Jennifer, that I discovered, because the march literally went right by where I had parked. Interestingly, and unbeknownst to me, they marched literally on the route that I drove in to get to report on this. And I only parked a few blocks away. We walked right by and I was like, well, I know they're wrapping up because I know the direction they're going. So I'm going to call it good. And the punchline to this, Seattle police were following the march about 3 blocks behind in unmarked vehicles.
Of course they were. Of course. Yeah. What a beautiful day for that, first of all. Great weather for that. It's very hard to talk and hold a dog, but she will not let me put her down now. She was like whining at my feet when I put her down during the video. So now I have to finish the show with this chihuahua on my arm.
Been there, done that.
Yeah. So I think it's a really good thing for people to start really taking more seriously Asian hate. I hate to use the label Asian, but it seems the most appropriate here. I think it's Asian American Pacific Islander is probably the most appropriate terminology. But this nation has such a long history of that wasn't erased by the development of the model minority stereotype. It was actually only kind of made worse. And I don't want to have to go back through a history lesson of this again about how much Asian hate has existed, especially in the Pacific Northwest, going back to the 19th century. So, it waxes and wanes depending on what's going on at any particular given moment, but it's never gone away.
No, it hasn't. And Pam, I'm seeing you in the comments. We have in our Twitter pictures of the police that were about 3 blocks behind. They were keeping out of sight, and the only reason I found out that they were there is I stopped. I started packing all my equipment up, and then it was like, oh, look, Seattle Police is here. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, they were following along. Thank you to all of the speakers. Thank you to the organizers for enabling us to cover that event. Deeply appreciated that we could amplify person of color voices and also the LGBTQIA community. There was a trans person that spoke there. There were complaints from people that live in the International District that if they call Seattle Police, it's like hours for them to show up. So they really don't feel that they're supported by the police to begin with.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I recommend that anybody that's curious about, and I don't know if they're open right now, anybody that's curious about the history of Asian people in Seattle, go to the Wing Luke Museum. If you're particularly interested in what it looked like during World War II, right before the internment camps, they do a really great guided tour of all of that. And it's really super informative. And I think it's really eye-opening for a lot of people to understand how traumatic that was and how much of a community was established and existed there and was very successful prior to internment camps during World War II.
And the people that experienced it firsthand and lived through it are dying off, just like the rest of our Holocaust survivors and our World War II veterans.
Yep, exactly.
Jennifer, thank you so much for that. We're going to go ahead and move on to our next story. So before we move on to our next story, there's something I want to remind you, which is you need to vote. The polls are going to close. We're going to close out the polls at the end of this section. And this is your time to get your vote in. You get to choose the news on the 10 stories that we unpacked on Malcontented Minutes. On Thursday, we had Nicaila Rice on the show, and she is part of Eastside Embrace, and they have events that occur here on the east side called Sit Down and Listen. This was their 5th event. They had it on Sunday from 2 to 4 at Juanita Beach Park. Quite frankly, they couldn't have asked for a better day or a better location. We've got some highlights from that event.
Hi there, my name is Nicaila Rice. I'm the founder of Eastside Embrace. We are a grassroots nonprofit in the Eastside, Redmond, Kirkland, and Bothell.
Tell us about the series that you're doing, the Sit Down and Listen series.
So this series actually came about when I was talking to Kirkland council members, and they gave us 2 minutes to speak about what our problems were and how we felt as Black people in this community. And I said, that's not enough time. So I've been holding these Sit Down and Listen events to amplify Black and BIPOC voices in our community, so we feel safe and people know what's going around with what's going on in our community. Yeah.
For me, I grew up always knowing that my mother was beautiful. I used to always hope that I would be like her and look like her, because that's how I was conditioned to be. But the issue with that is my mother is white. My father is Black, and I, as I'm sure you can tell, am biracial. seeing a woman that like you respected and looked up to who looked nothing like you. Because to me, growing up with how people treated my mother, I thought that was what beauty was. Yes, my mother is beautiful, but I am also beautiful. Let us break down the walls that keep us from connecting. Let us break down the walls that keep us from acting when we know that other people are suffering. Let us dismantle white supremacy from the inside out and decolonize our minds and our hearts.
I'm here to talk about race. What is race? Do you know what it is? Really, can you define it? If we ourselves cannot come up with a clear definition of race, how do we have these conversations with our children, with our parents, with our family and friends? It's such a tough conversation every time because it is so unclear. But these uncomfortable conversations are necessary. Keep taking action to be an active anti-racist ally or comrade, because that's what our children learn. They watch what we do.
So people don't see how the Asian community has the greatest wealth disparity out of any community. People don't see how Laotian, Cambodian, Hmong, Burmese, Bhutanese communities experience poverty at greater levels than low-income whites. We've all been and still are used as a wedge to uphold systemic racism.
Was a great and a powerful event. There was also poetry and there was music as part of that. So there was a celebration of Black, Indigenous, and person of color culture at the same time.
Sorry. She wanted She's like, I'm not done. Yeah, no, that actually looked really beautiful on a beautiful day, and to have these kinds of conversations to sit and listen to the things people are feeling. I thought it was particularly interesting, the first woman who talked about being biracial. And I don't know, I'm sure you're familiar with Toni Morrison. She wrote this book. She wrote Beloved, but she also wrote this book called The Bluest Eye. And I actually have a giant quote from that book on the inside of my arm. But it's this really like powerful book about notions of whiteness as the standard for beauty, among other things. But it's an amazing work. I highly recommend it. But I like really, she spoke and that instantly reminded me of that book, and just some of what that must mean for somebody who identifies as biracial, and to have to try and achieve this particular standard of beauty. But also, the woman that spoke about like wealth disparity among Asian populations and lower income whites, and decolonization. Somebody said comrade. I'm like, I'm in. This is our problem, not just somebody else's. So yeah, looked really like a wonderful event to attend, and now she is tangled up in my necklace.
It really was a wonderful event. You know what else was great to see? There were 3 members of the Kirkland City Council that were there through at least part of it. And there was one member of the Kirkland City Council that was there at least until I had an absolute hard stop. I had to leave. And they were still there when I was there. And their appearances were not token. I know just about everybody on the city council here. And I know all 3 of them are supportive. I don't know if I would necessarily use the word allies. And the reason I hesitate is there was a speaker there that talked about performative actions. One of the things that they had brought up, which I think is very valid in our community, they said they see more Black Lives Matter signs in Kirkland than the number of Black people they see. But when it comes to support for the Black community, where are those people? And I've talked about this, Jennifer, as you know, on the east side here, there's a lot of performative action. And I'll say it again, I'm not saying it to like poke you in the eye. It's just, you've got to go further than the Black profile picture last year and a hashtag. And, I put out the Black Lives Matter sign in my front yard. There is so much more work that needs to be done. It isn't to say that what you're doing isn't acknowledged, but it's performative. You have to have action.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's such a big thing because there was a lot of complaints during the protest that you would have white people, especially white young women, going down and taking selfies and posting them on their social media to make it look like they were participating. And they were essentially just going down there, taking the pictures and leaving so they could get some kind of like, I don't know, fulfillment or praise for, supporting the fight for equality and fight against racial injustice. So yeah, there is a lot of performativity that goes on in that respect by white people who should be allying rather than using it as a way in which to make themselves feel better about the current state of affairs in our nation.
That dog looks so content. And with that said, I'm going to go ahead and call it. We're going to close the polls. The polls are closed.
I'm not holding
And
it.
no, Sidney Powell.
You're not the same. I'm an American. You're a sick asshole.
You cannot protest the votes. We're going to do a very brief pause for the cause. And mods and admins, hopefully by that time, we'll have figured out what the winning story is.
Hold you through the rest of the show.
And we're back, and we're just waiting. I saw like the mods asking if there were any more votes.
I have dog fur in my lip gloss. This is great. She's like right at my foot. She's like, pick me up. No.
We want to see the dog again anyway.
No, I don't want to hold her. She's like an apple-sized chihuahua. And she's like, I'm picking her up and she's shaking because she's a chihuahua. But she's sitting here like staring at me and like getting all excited because she thinks I'm going to pick her up.
Pick me up, human. We're still waiting for the mods and admins to let us know what the winning story is. I don't hear. I'm just going to hit the Chud button for the heck of it.
Chud.
Okay.
Cannibalistic, humanoid, underground dwellers.
Chud. It's a cannibalistic humanoid underground dweller.
No, I'm not picking her up.
Cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers.
Power grid was shut off by Dickless here.
They caused an explosion.
Is this true?
Yes, it's true. This man has no dick.
And the winner is Jennifer. They love the trauma. The winning story is parents fleeing states implementing anti-trans measures with 9 votes.
The My Little Pony one because I was going to have to plug her ears if that was.
Well, if we want to do a story on bronies, if we can somehow tie it into LGBTQIA BIPOC, we'll do a brony story at another time.
Can we bring Skeletor into the conversation? Skeletor.
I'll get you next time, He-Man. All right. So parents fleeing implementing of anti-trans measures. So the story we're quoting from was from NBC. Identifying one family that's leaving Arkansas for New Mexico. Their child is 17. They're in the middle of hormone therapy at this time. The way that the law is written, even somebody who is undergoing treatment right now is cut off from that treatment, which is medically dangerous for some people. And that was one of the reasons that Asa Hutchinson, the Republican governor of the state, vetoed the bill. That was he expressly stated his concern of the stop of treatment for people that were already under treatment. But Jennifer, just so malcontents know, Jennifer and I, when we do our malcontented minutes, we work independently. We don't share the stories. We don't usually find out until about 5 o'clock what both our stories are. And every week, we have the same story. We both picked the North Carolina story, so I'm like, okay, Jennifer got hers in first. I need to go find something else. North Carolina is looking at these anti-trans measures. Oh, wow, really? So white Republicans who want to regulate what's going on in people's bedrooms and their bodies while refusing to wear a mask or get a vaccine, even though Donald Trump invented the vaccine, amazing, bigly, huge, great, want to pass anti-trans measures and now wondering why trans people are getting killed in their states.
Yeah, no, it's they're so invested in the traditional gender roles and vision of like society, the nuclear family. Because I was actually talking to somebody the other day, and this French historian and philosopher wrote this book, and it was turned into an article, but it's called Ideological State Apparatuses by Louis Althusser. And he talks about the ways in which the nuclear family and religion and these things are all central to society because it helps to indoctrinate people so they're more apt to participate in capitalism and construct this very specific type of capitalist-friendly society. So there are stakes, there are things at stake for keeping the status quo, and that is normalized gender roles, traditional gender roles, men having the majority of power in the workforce, only having two genders, because it supports, it actually supports capitalism because it allows them to indoctrinate, oh God, I'm getting all Marxist, I'm sorry, to indoctrinate people in particular ways that are going to continue to support a capitalist society.
It's gross is what it is. I've expressed many, many times what goes on between consenting adults, two or more, behind closed doors, is the business of the consenting adults. And the two key words there are consenting and adult. Now, we could debate all day long, is adult 16, 17, 18, right? Because different states have different ages of consent. Outside of that debate, I don't understand what the issue is. I really just...
It's capitalism. Seize the means of production and then date and love whoever the hell you want. I don't care. Nobody else should care. Like, you should be happy. Like, who gives a shit?
Science shows us it is rare. It's not something that is like super common, but somebody could be born with a female body but not have the female chromosomes inside that body. Somebody could be born with a male body but have female chromosomes inside of that body. And people that this happens to are in agony. They are in emotional agony because they're not living on the outward, and they're being forced to conform into something that they're not. And people that experience this, they experience it at a very young age, and how they identify with the toys they gravitate and what they want to wear and the hairstyle they want and how they play and who they want to be and the activities they want to do. And who are we to deny this? The suicide rate in the trans community is terrifying. And something that these bills are going to do is just drive more people, beautiful people that could contribute to a capitalistic society, for that matter, into suicide. It's not right.
It's not right. And it's gross because the Republicans, they want to espouse this, life matters from the moment of conception thing. And they're so concerned about, what women do and reproductive rights and controlling those, but they don't give a fuck about what happens to those children after they're born. They give zero fucks. Zero. And I'm going to say fuck one more time. They give zero fucks.
What's the F-bomb? This is written. This is written.
I love that button. I love that clip.
Sorry.
We put it up at Christmas, and I just have never taken the button off because I love it. I just adore that button. It's interesting you talked about this, and we're over time, and we need to wrap it up. But I was reading a piece that part of Biden's infrastructure bill is providing childcare and providing elder care so that people can go and work and not worry on what they're going to do with their elderly parents or their children. Hence, being able to hold jobs and contribute to a capitalistic society. And then by taking that worry away, Republicans be able to have more little children, which in theory could grow up to be Republicans. Because one of the things that Republicans are freaking out over, Jennifer, is the birth rate in the United States is continuing to fall. And Gen Z in particular is not having the Republican Party.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, but like, everybody, it's ingrained. You get married, you have children, you do this and do that. And I think Gen Z is more open to understanding that, might not be, if they have children, grandchildren, whatever, there might not be a planet left for their heirs to live on. There might be there's racial injustices. There's all of these things. There's great wealth disparities. That factor into decisions to have and raise a child and then worry about what's going to happen to that child and their children after, you're gone. So I think people are being more logical about having children based on what's going on in society. And so, yeah, of course that threatens the Republican Party. But at this point in time, the Republican Party is basically imploded upon itself. So I don't think having more kids is going to solve that.
There's great conversation going on over in the chat right now. Really good conversation among our malcontents on this issue. We could talk about it all night, but this is the part of the show, Jennifer, where we have to say goodnight. And I want to thank all of you malcontents for joining us this evening. We will be back on Wednesday, assuming that there isn't a verdict in the Chauvin trial. I want to make it really clear that our whole broadcast schedule is on a metaphorical knife's edge this week. If we're in the middle of a show and they're coming with a late verdict, it would be unlikely because of the hours of the time zone differences. But if for whatever reason they're deliberating that late and they're like, hey, a verdict's coming down, we will cut over to it. And I'll let you know mid-show, I may be running to Seattle with poll cam and not exactly know where I'm going. I'll probably go to East Precinct to probably be where I'll go and wait to see what happens from there.
I just think we're going to see some indicators in the coming days as they start to near a verdict of what's to come based on how they start to reinforce things.
Yeah, and the other thing we'll see, Jennifer, we've talked about this, the longer it stretches out, the less likely that we are probably going to see a guilty verdict. The other thing that'll be interesting is if it does drag out and if the jurors ask for additional instructions from the judge, generally it is shared. Well, the jurors have asked for this, or they've asked to see this piece of evidence, or they've asked for clarification on this piece of law. And you can read sometimes between the lines of what they're asking in that space.
Yeah.
So we'll see what's happening. It is going to be historic and momentous. I will close with, I'm getting a little tired of living through history that people will be reading about hundreds of years from now.
Yeah.
It's kind of exhausting. With that, Jennifer, I will see you on Wednesday. Malcontents, we will see you on Wednesday. Like, follow, share, subscribe, amplify the voice. We got to turn the volume up because the weather's getting nicer. And I know some of you aren't watching as much because, yeah, I know it's nice outside, but we're still in here doing this for you. So with that, Malcontent out. Malcontent News is a team of journalists, activists, and researchers with 3 key missions. A commitment to show an unfiltered view of the before, during, and after of key events live as it happens. To defend the First Amendment using our rights of a free press. And to amplify the voices of underrepresented individuals including Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Our team is committed to seeking equality for all and holding those in power accountable. The easiest way to support Malcontent News is to bookmark our website at malcontentnews.com, like and follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter, TikTok, Twitch, Instagram, and in the Google News app. To provide financial support, you can become a patron, make a one-time donation through Venmo, or link your Twitch account to your Amazon Prime account and use your free subscription to subscribe to Malcontent News. Thank you for supporting independent journalism and for being a malcontent.
You fit the profile. You're the malcontent.
Nobody wants to hear the nonsensical ravings of a loudmouth malcontent.
Antifa, fuck you! You are the biggest hypocrite on the face of the planet.
I say that you're a terrible reporter. That's what I say.